Post your alien encounter stories, I am very interested. Live in desert near UFO hotspot. Literally in the middle of nowhere. See weird shit all the time. Vivid AF nightmare. No moon after full moon. Running. Don't even know what. Just absolutely terrified, thinking don't want them to get me. I don't have a word for them, but they're terrifying. Lots of clammy little weird hands trying to grab at me. They get me. Light everywhere. Wake up. Killer headache. Nose is killing me. Put hand to nose. What the hell? Bastard is covered in blood. Blood nose from hell. Feet are clean but there are bruises on my legs. There's a weird mark on my side, almost looks like a birthmark but bubbled surface. Perfect shape of triangle. Wigging out now because what the hell? My boyfriend later called me to check up on me. He said he woke up and I wasn't in the bed, so he was worried but had to leave for work. Awesome sleepwalking adventure. Mom's driving little Anon home. We live in the country, stars are super clear. Suddenly, an airplane passes overhead. Typical airplane with colored blinking lights. Decide to watch it for some reason. Get home, I don't go inside because I want to watch this airplane until it's out of sight. Suddenly, airplane becomes a ball of white light the size of the moon. Shoots widening beam of light off to one side. Disappears. Airplane effect does too. Run inside, tell parents I just saw a UFO. Oh shit, our son is a schizo.jpg. Dad goes out to pee later. Comes in shaken, reports feeling a subsonic hum in the sky and ground. Oh shit, my son and husband are schizos.jpg. Next day. We find a weird footprint in the last patch of snow. Three-toed, bigger than any bird that lives in the area. Maybe it really happened. .jpg. My face when even people who believe in aliens think I made it up. Have any of you had any alien stories? I have one story that I can't explain. Be me. 8. Wake up in the middle of the night. Pitch black. Sick to my stomach. Feel horribly ill. Throw up on bed. Have urge to look at my door. See giant praying mantis thing standing in my doorway. Panic. I can't move. Try screaming. Can't scream. Stared at me for what felt like hours. Blacked out. Woke up around 7 a.m. Legs and chest hurt. Start crying. Limp to my mom. Told her what happened. Said it was just a dream. Calmed me down. Tell her about the pain all over my body. Said that I was probably really stressing my body in my sleep. An hour later. Eating breakfast. Mom made pancakes. Blood drops onto the plate. Feel nose. Look at hand. Covered in blood. Same dreadful hopeless feeling from last night hits me. Blackout. I don't remember anything else about that day. I still sometimes wake up at about 2 a.m. and just break down crying. My psychiatrist prescribed me some shitty anxiety medication that doesn't help me at all. I've told him about this and he just shrugged it off as night terrors but couldn't explain the nosebleed. Has anyone else had any similar experiences? Half asleep one day I awoke in my bed. Do not know the time, but it was certainly night. My eyes are shut but I was awake. Get the feeling that I know what's going on but don't know what. Feel a presence in the room. I reach out and present my index finger in the same manner as in the creation of Adam. Something touches back. A feeling of exhilaration and partially of fear filled my body. My hand still outstretched, the being caressed it. Apparently female, her hands covered mine in a gentle manner that seems almost motherly in a way. As she held my hand, a thought popped into my head. It is much louder than my normal thoughts, and very clearly is not my own. The voice was very feminine. Somehow knew that this was the entity speaking to me. She told me not to be afraid, and instructed me to roll over so my back was facing her. I wanted to see her face. I remember the desire to see her, but she simply ignored my request. She let go of my hand and I rolled over as instructed. A few seconds later I felt a sensation in my upper back. She was reaching through me. Her hands had gone right into my frigging back. Slowly the being entered my body. Felt her arms going into mine and her waist, which was much skinnier than mine, entering into me from behind. After that I woke up. I've got a couple from family members. Stepdad, few years after high school, I think. Driving around in the country with his first wife. Drove by farm, looked like the barn was on fire. Pulled in to warn farmer. Huge fireball raised up from behind barn. Flew away into the sky. My grandma and grandpa, and possibly my dad as a kid, I don't remember now. Driving home from the movies one night. Car suddenly died. Everything dark. Suddenly they're in a beam of light. Looked up out of windshield. Disc covered in lights hovering over them. Lights turn off, craft disappears. Car starts up, they drive home. Pretend they never saw anything. Took quite a bit to get that from my grandma. Not too long after that, they found a huge, perfect circle burnt into the limestone circle driveway. It was about 20 to 30 feet in diameter. Can it be from personal experience? If so then, be me. 7 years old. Decide to take a look out of the window in the middle of the night. Notice a round shape in front of the clouds. It was just a shadow, no lights or sounds. It was standing still. Stare at it for what seemed like hours. It never moved. Decide to go back to bed. Fast forward a few weeks. Start having strange dreams. There are things that enter my room while I am sleeping. They wake me up, I leave with them. Best way I could describe them at the time was praying mantises. Remember being enveloped in blue light. They would show me what the clouds looked like from above. I remember watching the earth shrink beneath my field of vision. Continually happened for several months. Try to tell my parents about what is happening many times. Oh Anon, you have such an imagination. To this day I still think it wasn't a dream, it had to be real. I remember every detail vividly. Driving in Bumpage, Illinois with best friends. 3 to 4 a.m. Pitch black on road. Look up, see two spotlights coming from a source in the sky sweeping across the ground. Drove around trying to find source until we found out they were coming from the sky. Driver got spooked. Other friends spooked. I was livid that they wouldn't get closer to the lights. Begged them to turn around as we started driving away. Two of us look, I'm the only one in the back seat. Light directly shines at our car towards me. Lights sweep again. Friends finally decide to turn car around. We turn car around. See lights just zip out of the area. 4 years ago it happened. For 4 years I always came back to that spot to see if the lights would ever come back. Ever since then, I got the shit stalked out of me by deer. An unnatural amount of deer experiences and sightings. But the lights, they never did come back. Stumbled upon this thread, quality stuff OP. Will contribute. B18. Late 90s, enjoy going up in the mountains of Virginia and camping solo, especially in the fall/early spring. Had gone around the beginning of May, pleasant days and chilly nights, perfect for campfires. On top of mountain with a good view of neighboring hills. Around dusk, gathering stuff for fire. Adjacent hill, open meadowy area. See what looks like one of those vintage silver rounded campers. Something not quite right about it. Continue getting wood, but catches my attention again. Realize it's too big to be a camper, and the windows in it are wrong. Also realize the reason it was getting my attention was that it was a really bizarre shade of silver. Almost like a silver glow around it, if that makes sense. There are figures around it I can't make out. Head back to camp and get binocs. It's a goddamn spaceship. Shaped like a big bean, seamless. But has pitch black, what I assume are, windows in a row around one half of it. There are little nodules of some kind around the base. Figures are boarding around the back of it, can't tell much other than they are in white clothing and have helmets, smaller than humans. All I can do is just stare at it in disbelief. It lifts up silently and just shimmers out of existence after about 30 minutes. Had no camera with me because poor redneck, and phones were not a thing yet. Have thought about it a lot over the years but always hesitated to tell anyone about it because it's just so unbelievable. I was home along one evening and had gone to sleep for the night. I live with my so and 2 indoor cats, but she was out of state traveling for business. I woke up in the middle of the night, wasn't sure of time but it was completely dark, because my body was freezing cold. I actually like it cool when I sleep and usually have the temperature around 70 degrees or colder since I live in Central Texas. But this was different. I was ice cold but wrapped in blankets. It was middle of summer so evenings aren't cold. When I grabbed my phone to look at the time, it seemed to be off and I pressed the on button but it didn't turn it on. Since I was half asleep, I shrugged this off. I walked out of my bedroom to go adjust the thermostat and noticed that the cats weren't around. This was weird because these furballs are always hanging out in the bed or around the bed. Anyhow, I walked to the thermostat and tried to adjust it but the power to the thermostat, I have a Nest, was nil and the power to the house seemed to be off. I peeked out of the upstairs window to see if any of my neighbors were having power issues and noticed that all of their outdoor lights were working just fine. From the time I woke to this moment was probably 1 to 2 minutes maximum. I decide to wander downstairs to grab some water, but am startled when I realize there is a glow of light coming from the first floor. The way my house is situated, I couldn't see the light until I had approached the stairs. I found this odd because the power seemed to be out just upstairs, which didn't make a lot of sense. I started walking down the stairs and began to hear a faint humming noise. The noise had a high pitch to it with arbitrary pulses of low sounds, almost like a muffled weed whacker that someone is throttling at random. As I continue to walk down the stairs, I spot a dark, slowly moving figure in the room with light at the bottom of the stairs. The next step that I take feels like I walked off the side of a cliff or was sucked into the floor. That is really the best way I can explain it because I don't remember what happened after that moment. I just lost all feeling from my body. My next memory is waking up again to the sound of my phone's alarm. Everything seemed back to normal. I sat there in bed, cats back to being lazy in bed next to me, and tried to think about the 2-minute incident that happened in the middle of the night. I am not a sleepwalker and I was definitely not dreaming. My security systems app shows the time whenever a door is opened or closed. I realized that my security system was disarmed on the app and that the front door had been opened and closed several times throughout the night. I pulled up my security footage from the exterior cameras and was surprised to learn that there was zero footage from the night. Like the motion sensors reacted to a random car driving by around 10 p.m. and then the next thing is another random car in the morning. So someone/something walked in and out of my front door, but the cameras did not capture any footage. My neighbor across the street has a good security system that points at my house, so I asked if he can review the footage from his cameras. I told him some made-up story about how I thought someone had broken into my truck. Anyway, he said it was weird because when he pulled up the footage from that night, his cameras did not record anything. Just a time gap once again. My first thought was that I was sleepwalking and that the memory was a dream, but it just couldn't have been. When I looked out of the window in the middle of the night, I distinctly recall a red pickup truck parked the wrong direction in front of the neighbor's house. I always notice when cars are parked left wheel to curb because I've gotten a ticket for this in the past. Anyhow, the truck was not there before I went to sleep, based on footage, but was there in the morning, again based on footage. So the truck was there when I saw it in the middle of the night. I definitely woke up in the middle of the night, cold as ice, no cats, no working phone or thermostat, saw the truck out of the window and then got warped by something on the stairs. A couple additional things were different in the house. The security system was disarmed and I definitely armed it before going to bed. The light was still on downstairs and that was absolutely off before I went to bed. My whole body smelled like burnt marshmallows. I know this is weird, but it's really how it smelled. And lastly, my 55-gallon fish tank that sits at the bottom of the stairs in the entryway was missing 2/3 of the water. Seriously, where the hell did 40+ gallons of water go? The whole area around the tank was bone dry and the fish were fine. On April 18, 1961 at around 11 a.m. in Wisconsin, a 68-year-old farmer named Joe Simonton encountered a silver ship which landed outside his home. A door opened where a humanoid being exited. Other beings were present around the interior of the ship. The beings were 3 feet in height, and wore black roll neck tops. The being looked like it was prepared to cook something for other beings. Inside had what looks like a flameless grill. The being asked Joe for water, and handed him a two-handled silver jug. He got the water and gave the jug back. When he got back, he found the beings cooking what looked like pancakes. The beings gave Joe 4 of the pancakes before leaving. The pancakes were 3 inches in diameter, and had small holes like a cracker. The pancakes were analyzed by the Air Force Technical Intelligence Center and found the things to be made from flour, sugar, and grease. Joe tasted one and said it tasted like cardboard. The fragment that was analyzed is an exhibit at the United States Air Force Museum at the Patterson Air Force Base. Project Blue Book had classified the case as a hallucination. Although he was believed by many people who interviewed him, even J. Allen Hynek, that helped in the project along with similar projects like Sign. On July 1968, in Fairmont, West Virginia, a hunter named Jennings Frederick, a U.S. Air Force veteran, was in the woods, hunting. He was about to go home until he heard a high-pitched voice behind him, saying, "You need not fear me. I come as a friend. We know of you all. I wish medical assistance. I need your help." Frederick then felt something prickly entangle his arm, which caused him to turn to see the being. He described it as having semi-human facial features, long ears, and yellow, slanted eyes. Its arms were no bigger around than a quarter. Its body resembled the stalk of a plant in shape and color, for it was slender and green. It had fingers described to be 7 inches long that ended in a thorn-like tip and suction cups. It quickly grabbed Frederick's hand with great strength, poking its fingers into his hand to drain some blood. Its eyes then started to spin, showing red and yellow, creating a pattern of swirling circles. The pain the man felt was gone, for he was hypnotized by its eyes. The whole transfusion lasted for 2 minutes, and he felt his blood being drained during it. It finally finished and quickly left up the crest of a hill. Frederick got up and tried to leave quickly. As he did, he heard a loud, deep humming, which he assumed must be the sound of a UFO. The alien came in. Nuremberg 1561. In the morning of April 14, 1561, at daybreak, between 4 and 5 a.m., a dreadful apparition occurred on the sun, and then this was seen in Nuremberg, in the city, before the gates, and in the country by many men and women. At first there appeared in the middle of the sun 2 blood-red semicircular arcs, just like the moon in its last quarter. And in the sun, above and below and on both sides, the color was blood. There stood a round ball of partly dull, partly black ferrous color. Likewise there stood on both sides and as a torus about the sun such blood-red ones and other balls in large number, about 3 in a line and 4 in a square, also some alone. In between these globes there were visible a few blood-red crosses, between which there were blood-red strips, becoming thicker to the rear and in the front malleable like the rods of reed grass, which were intermingled, among them 2 big rods, one on the right, the other to the left, and within the small and big rods there were 3, also 4, and more globes. These all started to fight among themselves, so that the globes, which were first in the sun, flew out to the ones standing on both sides. Thereafter, the globes standing outside the sun, in the small and large rods, flew into the sun. Besides, the globes flew back and forth among themselves and fought vehemently with each other for over an hour. And when the conflict in and again out of the sun was most intense, they became fatigued to such an extent that they all, as said above, fell from the sun down upon the earth as if they all burned, and they then wasted away on the earth with immense smoke. After all this there was something like a black spear, very long and thick, sighted, the shaft pointed to the east, the point pointed west. Whatever such signs mean, God alone knows. No lie, I saw like 15 UFOs in the sky just outside of Washington, D.C. at like 2 a.m. It was the most surreal experience of my life. They had the same type of movement as flying saucers from a cheesy 1950s sci-fi movie, except they were also blinking in and out of existence and would disappear and reappear in a different spot. It was right over the interstate, and at one point one was flying directly above my car. The road had several other cars on it and everyone was going really slow. I assumed because of the spectacle, I was sure it would be a very documented sighting. However, the next day I was unable to find anyone else at all talking about it. There were also black helicopters flying around with the crafts. 2 other people in my car experienced the same thing. I've been having really weird paranormal shit happening to me since childhood, but the overt grey alien abduction stuff started about 3 years ago, or that's when I started remembering it anyway. Greys behind the futon. This one incident was probably the most intense one that I can recall. At the time I was sleeping on this cheap half-broken futon. I had become paranoid after other experiences, so I kept a big cabar knife next to me whenever I slept. This is important later. I went to sleep like normal that night and at some point was woken up by something in my room. It was really bright in my room. I thought it was daylight at the time, but after looking at other abduction reports now I'm not so sure it was sunlight lighting up my room. I was still groggy and my eyes hadn't adjusted to the light yet, so I couldn't at first make out what I was seeing. I noticed silhouettes standing right behind my futon and at first thought, why are my parents in my room? After my eyes adjusted for a second I had quite a shock. There were 3 grey aliens standing right behind my futon only a few feet away from me. I panicked and started to sit up when one of the greys shoved his torso through the back of my futon like it wasn't even there and got right in my face. I don't know how they do it, but when these things lock eyes with you they can somehow control you to some degree. This thing was like an inch away from my face and locking eyes with me, and from that point the memory is jumbled. I know it was trying to cause the paralysis that usually accompanies these events. After the eye lock I just have brief flashes of a struggle. Apparently I had fought off the paralysis enough to get behind the futon, but that's all I remember. I woke up in the morning on my futon like nothing had happened. I noticed one difference though. The cabar knife I kept next to my bed had been put back facing the opposite direction. My state-assigned troll will be here to attack my story in 3, 2, 1. This next one is more recent. Cartoon UFOs outside the window. I have no way to tell for sure if this one was physical or astral, but I'm leaning towards astral. This was shortly before I started religiously filming myself sleeping with a webcam every night. At this point I had gotten rid of the old futon and replaced it with a loft bed, basically a bunk bed but without the bottom part. The head of this loft bed is right next to the top of my window, pic related. I went to sleep without incident that night but was woken up at some point by an extremely loud noise. If I had to describe it, I would say it sounded like there was a freight train directly outside my window. I sat up in bed and noticed that my whole body seemed like it was vibrating. I reached out over the edge of the bed and opened up the blinds to see what on earth was making that horrible noise. Suddenly all I could see is a two-dimensional image of cartoon flying saucers and cartoon aliens. They were even done up like pixel art in an old 8-bit Nintendo game. This image took up the entirety of my field of vision. I couldn't even see the blinds or the bedroom anymore. I guess maybe this was a screen memory? I don't really know, but it was bizarre. I jerked away from the blinds and regained my vision of the room again, but then I felt this sense of weightlessness. It feels like when you go down a big drop on a roller coaster and your butt starts to lift up off the seat. I was already very close to the ceiling due to the loft bed and was suddenly pulled up to the ceiling very quickly. Instead of going through the ceiling like in many abduction accounts, I hit the ceiling. I don't know if this is because I was trying to resist or what. The last thing I remember was floating up there against the ceiling. Woke up in bed the next morning like nothing had happened. This next one wasn't necessarily alien related, but it could have been. Shadows on the ceiling. The first strange event that I can consciously remember happened to me when I was 4 years old. I was laying in bed and I couldn't go to sleep. Suddenly out of nowhere these shadows appeared on my ceiling. They weren't like normal shadows. They were pitch black and seemingly had no source. There were 6 of them evenly spaced in a circle on my ceiling, and they rotated around in a clockwise direction. The shadows were shaped sort of like ovals but with serrated edges. Like if you took a circular saw blade but stretched it out into the shape of an oval. I wasn't terrified at first so much as just sort of dumbfounded. I was trying to understand what exactly I was looking at. Suddenly these things seemed to shoot off the ceiling directly at me and disappeared either onto me or into me. I don't really know how to explain it properly. When this happened they weren't visible anymore, but I could feel things touching me. It felt like a whole bunch of invisible hands were touching me all over my body. After this the shadows just appeared back on the ceiling and continued their clockwise motion. I started to have that feeling of weightlessness and I started floating out of bed and slowly floated around the room in the same clockwise circle. That's when fight or flight terror finally kicked in and I started struggling and flailing around. Whatever force it was that had me floating let go of me and I ran across the house to my parents' bedroom. I woke them up and told them what happened. They didn't believe me, of course, and they let me sleep with them that night. My dad went and checked out my room right after I ran in there, and of course the shadows were gone. My family always just told me it was a really vivid nightmare, but I can't really see how. There was no point of waking up in bed. It was straight from the shadows to my parents' room with nothing in between. I have posted dozens of times about my experiences on /x/. Last year in April I was watching Babylon 5. In the episode Sheridan gets abducted by grey aliens called Streeb, an apparent nod to Whitley Strieber's experience. Well, that night I had an experience while sleeping. A being was over me while laying down in my bed. I wasn't able to make out what that being was. It injected something into my neck. I forget the exact order of the next events and time. My next experience say was something or somebody was trying to enter a door of my house. I had a vision of it. Maybe the vision was through my security camera. Apparently wake up if not awake already. Security monitor is off. Turn it on, nothing is there. Play back footage, nothing showing. Some days after have a vision of 7 to 8 feet tall Mantis aliens approaching the back of the house. There are at least 2 of these aliens. Apparently wake up, play footage again, nothing showing again. Have another experience sleeping some days later. It is of an android grey alien. I get an insight into what it is made of. A grey, silver, or aluminum appearance 3D flexible metal mesh. I get the impression this is a weak-ass metal. This alien has some sort of brain in its head that is some sort of black sphere. The final experience in this series of experiences in April and May, I have some out-of-body experiences while sleeping. I try to remote view some sort of European-looking government building. I get the impression somebody is trying to block me. I wake up. Another night I have 2 out-of-body experiences in one night. First is to a nondescript place. I slam into my bed like I have fallen into it or have tried to walk while laying down. The next one that night I am remote viewing my back porch. Again the bed slam happens. Since then later in the year I have had a few remote views sleeping of the front of my house. I have also encountered in a dream an attractive older female with black angel wings. Here's mine. I was never particularly into this kind of stuff until something happened to me about a month ago. I have no previous diagnoses or indications of mental illness. I was visiting someone at a hospital in San Francisco with my family and decided to stay back in the parking garage and take a nap. Usually, I'm not dumb enough to sleep in a car alone in any city, but for some reason the moment we drove into the parking garage a sudden sleepy spell hit me. This is where things got weird. The moment I was alone I felt this intense feeling of dread. The parking lot was empty aside from myself and a ticketer who was on the floor above. Thinking I was being irrational I laid down anyway. The moment I laid down my whole body went numb. It was almost like I had sleep paralysis, but I've never had it come on randomly like this before. As I tried to regain control of my body my eyes darted around and I saw every seat of the car occupied by small alien-looking things. By small, I mean unusually small. About 2 to 3 feet tall at most. They were all staring at me. I felt pressure on the top of my skull and then heard a rush of energy coming out of the top of my scalp. All these terrifying strange imageries started forcing their way into my mind. Mostly weird symbols and pictures of galaxies. I tried to block it out by cheesily thinking of how much I loved my family. After a while of this I snapped myself out of it and managed to sit up. I looked around me and they were still sitting around me. Outside the windows there were a few other lingering ones just staring at me. When my family came back they disappeared. Easily one of the scariest things I've had happen to me. I've had the privilege of witnessing 6 UFOs in the past 10 years. Mostly weird lights in the night sky with abnormal movements or lights with large cloud cover, but I'll divulge my best sighting. At parents' chalet north of Montreal. Go for a walk after dinner to throw out garbage. Walk towards old campground who had just installed an outdoor basketball court. Shoot some hoops and work off dinner. Spend 10 minutes there and look up and see a very bright light. Mid-September, 6:30 in the evening, still really bright out. If this was a star I would have noticed it days earlier. Literally walk backward to Chalet, tell my dad to come to see this as I grab our telescope. Light is right between two trees and I find it immediately. Perfectly round, translucent, with what looked like waves in the center and purple/yellow lights emanating on the edges. To the naked eye it looks still. In the telescope it is rotating and creeping towards us. Dad looks at it, can't figure it out. Sister looks at it, doesn't know what it is. All three of us have university education in STEM and rack our brains trying to figure out what this is. Drifts over our chalet for 20 minutes, eventually going behind a treeline. I run to the initial road that led to the camp to see if I could see it as it crossed a valley. 2-minute quick walk and reach the area and it's completely gone. Our phones weren't working when this came over and didn't have a good camera at the time. It was so odd, but it gets weirder. Next day go for a walk past the camp along an ATV trail. About 30 minutes from the chalet on this separate road on the other side of the lake. Hear a slight buzzing and look up. This jet flies over really fast like it cleared the area in less than 2 seconds, but I noticed the shape was strange. It was almost like a goose, or the rebel Ayyy with a longer middle and 2 wings curved inwards. It was going straight and as it passed over me it turned rapidly and disappeared. The sonic boom was almost like a whistle rather than a regular jet. We aren't near any military or air bases, and the closest airport, which is more for pleasure craft, is 50 kilometers away. I grew up near military bases and I can tell you I've never witnessed anything like this. I wasn't drunk or stoned, and have no prior issues with mental illness/hallucinations. I could probably fill a whole thread with all of the shit that I and my family/loved ones have experienced. It runs on my mom's side of the family. I will try to type out as many stories as I can in chronological order, starting with my grandma. Grandma. It's 1971 and grandparents just finished having sex. Orb of light flies in through window. Hovers over my grandma's pucci and goes inside her. Grandma later finds out she's pregnant. Not married, but they decide to keep the baby, my mom, and get married because of that event. Nothing has really happened to my mom, but both I and my little sister have had a lot of experiences. I'll start with my sister since hers happened first. 2016, sister is 3 and I am 21. Visiting my parents and staying the night. Laying in bed late at night when I hear the front door open and shut and my sister walking to the couch and crying. Go see WTF is happening. She is now laying on the couch freaking out, screaming and crying. I have never seen her as scared before or since. She is completely inconsolable and won't tell me what's wrong. The next day she tells me that short green men took her. One was naked and the other was wearing clothes. As they were taking her they started arguing and one shot the other and made him freeze. I didn't find out until yesterday, but apparently she has had several other incidents. I don't know a lot about the details of the others since I wasn't there, but I'll type out what I heard from my other sister. Green men take her again. There are 3 and they are not wearing clothes. She is laying down and there are bright lights. Green men put a computer in her leg. I couldn't get any more details about this from my other sister, unfortunately. Both my mom and other sister have not had any other experiences, but I have had a few that I'll type out. 2018. Just woke up. Suddenly have a strange feeling that I need to look out the window because there are UFOs. Look out window and there is indeed a UFO. Starts moving around the sky in their typical fashion. A few more appear and kind of dance around each other for a bit. Try to take a photo but they are super far away and barely visible and my camera sucks. They all kinda stop and flicker out like a light bulb while going up into the sky. Next experience is a dream I had. Hanging out with Greys. They take me to another planet. It's an off-world colony of humans. Their culture is like a mix of Southeast Asian, Indian, and African. I'm exited and try to talk to a dude but they don't speak English and he just looks at me like I'm crazy. My ex had a similar dream about being taken to an off-world colony by Greys. Apparently I was there. I had always told myself if I were to get abducted I would ask them to take him too so I would know it was real, so that kind of spooked me. Next experience was seeing another UFO. Thanksgiving last year. Taking the bus to parents' house. Looking out the window when I see something bright in the sky. It's oval-shaped, no wings or anything like that and very low flying and close. Still can barely make it out because it seems to be reflecting light, can glimpse a bit of grey metal though. It's just hovering in the sky. I am very confused and start to wonder if I should take a picture. The second I think this is disappears like the other UFOs. It flickers off like a light bulb while going up into the sky. After that I had a lot of dreams involving Greys. 2 days after I see the UFO. Dreaming that I am standing next to a Grey. Grey puts a huge spider on my arm. In the dream have a weird thought. I am dreaming and in this dream there is a spider on my arm but in real life someone is grabbing my arm and putting something in it. The sensation of something being on my arm in real life is overwhelming. Suddenly Grey makes it stop and I look at my arm and the spider is gone. Next dream was pretty cool. Be hanging out with Greys. They are attempting to teach me to fly UFO. I am too big for the top to close over my head and there is no seat belt so I could have easily fallen out. Can barely get the thing off the ground for some reason even though I have experience flying small planes. Later they are trying to teach me astronomy, which stars belong to which alien species galaxy. I can't remember any of it though. One more dream, the last one that I had. Wake up at 2 a.m. Suddenly get an intense flash of memory. I am standing in a spaceship talking to a ton of aliens. One normal Grey. One purple Grey that seems to be a leader. 2 of those Nordic aliens, didn't even believe in them before this. 3 beings that are just pure light. The room I'm in has big windows, we very high in the sky and I can look down at Earth from them. I think I am begging them to save us from our world leaders. When I'm awake I have the feeling like I need to do hypnotic regression or something to uncover more memories. I feel like they are training me for something but I don't know what. I once was talking to a Freemason and he said that he was once in contact with a race of aliens that look like humans with olive skin and thin brown hair, which is what the women in my family look like. Almost forgot, but I have some very strange memories from when I was 13. I just remember being outside of my apartment complex in the middle of the night and seeing a UFO take off into the sky, and at one point being behind the complex at the park and seeing a UFO on the ground. Before all of this happened I just thought it was a weird false memory or daydream. Sorry for my English, it's not my first language. When I was 5 or 6 years old, I've been visited by grey aliens, like in Ops Pic. They turned up without a warning or anything. One day they simply stood in front of my bunk bed. I slept on top and my little sister slept on the bottom. They must have been around 150 centimeters tall, that's 4.92 foot according to Google, because I could look them directly in the face. I still remember the first time I saw them. I opened my eyes and when I saw that face, I had an extreme feeling of dread and terror, but I couldn't move at all, so I lied there, staring at it, trying to scream, but I couldn't. I tried, but it was like there was nothing coming out of my mouth. I don't know how long it took me to calm down, but when I finally did, I fell asleep and woke up the next morning. I was able to remember everything. That was only the start. The following weeks, they showed up frequently and I sort of became used to them. Never lost that feeling of dread completely though. Once I was more calm they started communicating with me. I would describe it as telepathy, but without hearing voices or anything. It was more like knowing what they thought. Kinda like some sort of download or upload, if that makes any sense. And they also knew what I thought. I remember them asking me questions. Nothing special, basically they were asking about my day and why I did X and how I did Y. It was pretty weird. I asked them where they came from and other stuff like how they got here, but they always gave evasive answers like from far away or shit like that. They've also been trying to explain things to me. I didn't know what they were talking about, but in retrospective it was some new age bullshit. I no longer really remember anything exactly, because that was 25 years ago, so don't bother asking. I think it was something about souls getting reborn and shit like that and consciousness spanning multiple lives over different time periods and persons at the same time. It was pretty out there. This happened over a couple of months and then I have never seen them again. Well, once when I was 15 or 16 I woke up one night because something grabbed my leg and almost pulled me out of my bed. I remember I could barely move, it was like moving through molasses if that makes sense. I dragged myself up to my pillow and managed to roll over so I was lying on my back. Facing the window, I was able to make out the silhouette of a skinny, but probably 170 centimeters tall being, that moved like it was underwater or something. It bowed forward and this is when I totally black out. That's it. Never had any other encounter in my entire life. One more thing, kids from the neighborhood at that time went crazy over spotting UFOs at night. Only my closest friends know about this story. Here's a story I just posted in another thread. Be me. Really into contacting /meditation/astral projection. Have a lot of alien dreams, can green text more of them later. Sleeping one day and become aware in dream. Hanging out with my aunt and 2 cousins in hallway. They are hanging out with some alien. Seems normal cause dream. Trying to talk to aunt/cousins and alien keeps poking me. Bastard keeps poking/prodding me, actually hurts. Leave the hallway through some door, alien follows me. He's white and kinda hunching over. He's pissed at something, won't leave me alone. Suddenly I'm only half in control of my body. Start sticking fingers in my ass. Alien is frigging mind controlling me. I tell him stop doing that. He responds, I'm not doing it, you're doing it, very sinister like. Summon all my willpower to break the mind control. Dream goes fuzzy and I wake up. Did some research on white aliens, run into story from Charles Hall about working in government facilities where he is talking about tall white aliens who among other things have the ability to use mind control, that they enjoy toying with the guards who they deem as lesser than them by mind controlling them. Sent chills all over my body. Never frigging heard of this shit before. I have had a few other very vivid alien dreams if anyone is interested. – 16 years old. Living in San Jose, CA. With like 2 to 3 friends. Halloween night like 11 p.m. No one is on anything other than alcohol/weed. Green light shoots up into the sky at a 180-degree angle, turns at a 90-degree angle and flies off at the speed of light. It vanishes, leaving behind a green light trail that slowly fades after 10 seconds or so. Everyone saw it. What the hell was this? I think I actually saw an alien spacecraft. It had to be an aircraft. No other celestial object comes up from the ground straight up, turns at a 90-degree angle and takes off like that. Anyone ever seen something similar? When I was a small child, maybe between 4 to 6 years old, I remember waking up on a couple of occasions and seeing non-human creatures near me. One time it was something that resembled a small gray outside of my window looking in at me. It seemed surprised that I saw him. Another time there was something standing at the foot of my bed. I couldn't make out its features very well, but it seemed to be more husky and less ethereal than a gray. At the time I thought it looked like Alf the alien on TV. It also roughly matched the description of the squat blue aliens described by Whitley Strieber in Communion, Pick related. I know I was very frightened, but I don't recall screaming or trying to run from the room, which surprises me when I think about it as an adult. I think I just closed my eyes and hid under the covers. Around that same time, I had recurring dreams about 2 creatures I thought of as the Mud Boys or Mud Brothers. I called them that because their skin looked like dried mud. They were thin and taller than me, but given how young I was they still might have been shorter than the average adult. The dreams typically involved them taking me outside of my house, usually to the backyard, binding me to something, usually the fence in the yard, and then examining me and taking samples from my body. They seemed especially interested in my blood. I would be scared at first, but not terrified like I would expect. They would talk to me to try to distract me and keep me calm. Sometimes they would act silly or tell silly or dirty jokes, nothing sexual, just the kind of bathroom humor that a small child might find amusing. I've never had dreams with the recurring characters like that since then. As I got older, I dismissed my childhood memories as being part of an overactive imagination. But recently, more and more strange events started to eat away at my skepticism. A dream I had a few months ago shook me to the point where I'm now open to considering that something else is going on. In the dream, I was being led through some kind of facility, like a warehouse with offices, by a well-dressed human man. We were talking, but I can't remember what was said, just that there was a sense of urgency and importance. He took me into an office, sat behind a desk, and asked me to sit in front of the desk. He then started explaining something to me, or asking me questions. I was keeping eye contact with him as we were talking. I became aware that something strange was happening with his eyes. Like his irises started changing shape, shimmering and moving into different patterns. Kind of like the Hypnotoad from Futurama. I was fascinated and then felt like I was being mesmerized. I suddenly had the feeling that he wasn't human, and I asked him, "What are you?" He responded, "I'm the janitor," with a kind of sarcastic and deadpan tone. I felt like I needed to get out ASAP and instantly jumped to my feet. But the sensation of getting up felt very bizarre, as if I was made to stand up by something that had hijacked my nervous system. Immediately after realizing that I wasn't in control of my body anymore, I felt a tremendous invisible force pick me up from underneath my armpits and push me up towards the corner of the ceiling. I was hanging in the air with my feet dangling, looking down at the man at the desk, who still appeared to be human, apart from his strange eyes. I heard him say, "You don't need to see this part," and suddenly my vision went black, then all of my other senses disappeared. It felt like my mind was freed from my body and just floating in a black void. I was terrified that I had died or been put into a coma or something. I then felt like I was being pulled back towards something, and then fell, and then woke up in bed. But I was still mostly paralyzed. I was looking at the open doorway to my room. Between the opened door and the wall, a space of maybe 6 to 7 centimeters, I saw a very thin gray-looking being peeking out a bit and then ducking back to hide behind the door after I saw him. As this was happening, I heard some kind of conversation in my head, saying something like, "He's been taken care of," or "it is handled." The creature behind the door peeked out again, and seemed like it was afraid or cautious. At this point I felt like I had been violated and was extremely angry. With a lot of effort I was able to speak. I said, "I'm awake, I'm back, come at me, you bastard. I'm awake." I felt like I had won somehow, and I wanted to taunt the creature behind the door and frankly to rip his head off. The creature ducked completely behind the door, and I regained control of my body. I was angry but still afraid and very confused. After a moment I got up and moved my door to look behind it, but there was nothing there. I felt pain in my armpits and noticed a strange lump under the skin in one of them. I felt very zoned out for the rest of that morning and exhausted for the rest of the day. Something about the man in my dream saying I'm the janitor stuck out to me. I wondered if maybe I had some kind of alien experience, but it seemed too bizarre and unlikely. Why the hell would an alien claim to be a janitor of all things? I felt compelled to search online for alien abduction janitor. I assumed that nothing would come up and that would help to confirm that it was just a dream. But one of the first results that came up led me to a book by UFO researcher Carla Turner. She describes a dream by her husband that involved being in a strange school and encountering a janitor as well. That absolutely floored me. I know this probably sounds like basic sleep paralysis or coincidence. And maybe it is. But I've had sleep paralysis before and this experience was totally different. For one, my sleep paralysis episodes are never tied to dreams in that way. They also usually do not involve visual hallucinations, but when they do, I only see vague forms or shadows, not distinct beings like the asshole hiding behind my door. Most importantly, I usually brush off the sleep paralysis episode almost immediately. I'll feel afraid at the very beginning, but once I realize what's happening, I'm just annoyed and waiting for it to end. Once I regain my senses, I either go back to sleep immediately or wake up. I don't feel a lingering fear for days afterward. After that episode, one had a few other dreams where I saw strange lights in the sky. My wife has also woken up with strange bruises and markings she can't account for. Lots of other strange things have happened in my life before and since then. My story's pretty simple but definitely strange. Was out with some buddies around 1 AM out doing a night hike. We make it to the top of a small mountain when we notice, 3 of us, a weird light just kinda slowly bouncing around. It had a strange shimmer to it and it seemed far too close for it to be something up in space. All of a sudden it stops its seemingly random movements and goes from 0 to 1000 miles per hour out of nowhere. The light went out when it jetted off, but it took about half a second to fade. Could be a badass military drone. I'd say it was about 10 years ago. Southern California, by the way, not in one of the major cities though. Last Christmas around 6 AM. I was looking at the stars when I suddenly noticed a white/yellowish pulsating light traveling very fast. It repeatedly dimmed until disappearing and then immediately came back until becoming slightly brighter than the stars. At no point I could distinguish its shape, even when it passed above me, just the pulsating light. It was a plane. The direction it was going wasn't in the flight path that commercial planes around that zone travel. Never seen a commercial plane with lights like that. Noticeably faster than a commercial plane, especially if you take into consideration how high it was flying to not be visible except for its lights. Never had issues distinguishing the shape of a commercial plane. Pretty sure commercial planes don't fly at such ridiculous heights. If you know what planes have those characteristics, let me know. I have 2 stories. Summertime 19. Live on one of the final routes to DAB. Usually go to bed with my GF, but she's doing some training for the Navy. Vidya and comfy shows all day. At around 2 in the morning I decide I should get some rest. Go upstairs to my bedroom and slip into bed. Have a really hard time falling asleep. Here's the sounds of planes passing over my house, nothing too obnoxious, just reoccurrent white noise. Later, can't remember when exactly, sound of another jet passing over the house. Whirring sound of some kind off engine, I'm assuming, sounds a little bit different from all the other engines that passed over the house while I've been in bed. The relative sound of the engine stops fluctuating in intensity. Whatever it is, it doesn't sound like it's moving. Stays what sounds like in the same relative spot for about 15 seconds. Seems like forever. Instead of the sound passing over my house like all the other planes have, it just frigging goes the way it came. WTF. Winter 20. Sleeping at GF's place. She loves going to bed early, and as soon as the clock hits 9 PM she immediately gets tired and starts bitching about how we should go to bed. Anyway, she's fast asleep and I'm trying to fall asleep. All of the sudden hear what I can only describe as a sort of chirping from the corner of the room. WTF. Sounds like 2 different creatures making these noises. The frequency of it sounds like a small conversation. If I'm not wrong, that's what greys sound like when they try and communicate with each other. Also, I'll post my experiences, and share something two friends experienced at separate times and shared with me. Both of my experiences happened when I was in prison. The first one was actually a nightly occurrence and went on for a couple of months. One night, around 9 p.m., my bunkie excitedly tells me to look out the window of our room, and lo and behold, there were a bunch of lights in the sky, hovering over the woods. Now I know that there are 1 or 2 Air Force bases located near there, Fort McGuire and Fort Dix, so I would assume that whatever the lights were, they had something to do with that. Anyway, they would move erratically, sometimes fast, sometimes slow, sometimes lining up into formations, disappearing, reappearing in different spots in the sky, etc. This would happen every night, starting around 8:30 p.m. and going on till God knows when. Eventually I'd just get bored of watching it and go to bed. Sometimes we'd count the lights, and there would be like 6 of them, then we'd count again and see only 2. A minute later, there would be like 12. Sometimes one would go rogue and fly off to the right on its own, and seem to suddenly speed up before disappearing. Once, one of the lights starting shining very, very brightly, it was a circular, pulsing red and yellow burning in the sky. This all happened around the end of 2015. My other experience in prison isn't something I saw, but rather, something I heard. This was about 2 years after seeing the lights in the sky. I now had a single cell, no bunkie. I was lying in bed trying to go to sleep for the night, when all of a sudden, I heard a very clear, distinct, uniform digital sounding noise in one of my ears, I believe my right ear. It was 4 computerized kind of sounding tones that descended in equal pitch, one after the other. So like a do kind of thing. And that was it. Being the person I am, I immediately thought of UFOs and aliens, but also realized that it could have been any number of things. I do have a touch of tinnitus, so it could have just been something to do with slight hearing damage. The thing is, I got out about 3 months ago after doing 7 years, and I started looking into this kind of stuff again. I came across a post on some blog that talked about attunements, how some extra-dimensional beings or what have you will for whatever reason choose to attune someone so that they are better able to receive messages/communications. One of the types of attunements I read about basically described the exact auditory phenomenon that I experienced. I also talked with a lot of people while I was away about their experiences with UFOs, out-of-body experiences, all kinds of crazy shit, and I've heard some really interesting things. But the last thing I'm going to share actually happened about 11 years ago, to some friends of mine. This is the last post from me for now. The thing my friends experienced: a buddy called me. He and his girlfriend were driving home from New Hope, Philadelphia. We lived in Levittown, Philadelphia at the time. Over the phone, he was excitedly telling me how there was an object flying overhead, heading in the direction of where we lived. He described it as a straight line on a diagonal, so like a huge slash basically, moving how the backslash would move if pushed to the right. That was its forward motion. He was freaking out, telling me how 3 black helicopters were tailing it. About 2 or 3 weeks later, I was outside smoking with my other friend. We all lived together, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you." And he proceeded to tell me the same exact thing friend number 1 had told me. And I'm 99% sure he wasn't just regurgitating information from friend number 1 because they hated each other, Friend number 1 was dating friend number 2's mom. It was the mom's house we lived at. Haha. So yeah, he was telling me the same exact thing about the slash and the 3 black helicopters chasing it, and he said it was heading straight towards Willow Grove Air Force Base, which had been shut down for a while at that point. Also, my supervisor at work showed me enlarged pictures he took with his shitty flip phone of a UFO over US Highway Route 1. It was a saucer shape, with a green glow around it, and 2 orange lights below it, crisscrossing each other. This was all in Bucks County, Philadelphia, and there were so many UFO sightings around there at the time, that the Discovery Channel, I think, did a special called UFOs over Bucks County, or some shit like that. We all watched it together, but it was garbage. So yeah, that's it. I'll check back here later tonight. It's not a real story as far as it goes. It was a nightmare I had, but since then strange stuff has been happening at my house. Fall asleep. Dream starts. I'm traveling with my parents, sister, my girlfriend, my 3 cats and dog on the car. We are going to a place called Zona del Silencio here in Mexico. It's really close to my hometown and I've been there before. Car fails. We're stuck at a little village called Quimicas del Rey, which is famous for being way too close to Zona del Silencio and also because many people commit suicide there. Also, it is said that there are real witches there, and yes, I've been there before too. We get off the car. No possible way to fix the car until tomorrow morning when village's mechanics are open. Decide to stay in a hostel. Everything is going smoothly, we are having fun as we surround the fire we made. Notice there are 4 owls on the trees closer. They're quietly staring at us. Ignore them. Finally, time to sleep. My sister wakes me up. She's scared as hell. Jinjin's, our cat, gone. Jinjin's gone. She went after an owl, she says while crying. Where did she go? I ask. She followed it into that old house. As scared as I am, the love for my cat is bigger than any fear. Get up and go to the house. As I get deeper in the house, I start to feel scared. Here Jinjin, she seems scared and acts aggressively towards something in the dark. Probably the owl. Go grab her. Strangely, she doesn't run away when I approach her as she would do any other time. Hear footsteps, but these aren't like your usual footsteps, it's clearly who isn't wearing shoes. Start to get even more scared. Bolt to the entrance of the old house. Start calling out for my family. Feel the footsteps closer. The door seems to be closed. Someone with a flashlight is outside. As I keep running, the door opens. A hand comes from the outside and grabs me forcefully. It's my GF. She's crying and me family is running to our direction. As soon as they look at the old house, they get scared and start screaming. They too start running away. We are all running, but I don't get why they are so scared. Hey, calm down, it's probably just a hobo. Girlfriend tells me to not look behind. Look behind. Gray thin alien standing at the door. Nightmare ends. Wake up screaming. Never ever happened this to me before. The following days I've been hearing strange noises around the house at night. My cats, they sleep on my bed, notice them too and get strangely agitated. Last night had another dream. This time I'm at the city, meet girlfriend, and suddenly the city is empty and from the rooftops of every building greys start to look down to us, quietly. Rush to her house in my car. We get in the house. She goes up calling for her mom. I stay down at the living room. Start seeing humanoid silhouettes outside. Girlfriend screams. Goes downstairs at full speed. Grey alien slowly comes downstairs, staring at us. Seriously, this has been a shit week. I'm not usually the kind of guy that fears aliens or paranormal shit, but this have been pretty weird and I'm honestly scared to get home tonight. I live alone. Pic related is exactly how they looked at my dream. Something that I find kind of odd is that my first nightmare involved owls and just now I found out there are theories about owls being aliens. I've never heard that kind of theory. I'm honestly scared as hell. Any thoughts? Probably just nightmare because I saw signs one too many times, but here we go. Be me. Around 10. At my grandma's house. Wake up in the middle of the night. See a grey outside the window. Blink. Grey is standing above me. Blackout. It happened really fast, so no idea if I could move or not. What do you guys think happened? A few months ago. Family saying shit about how they saw some kind of static light in the sky that was making spirals or something and then disappeared. That same night there was some kind of light moving around inside the small lake behind my house. Also looked like there was some kind of inhuman figures moving around with the light, but I couldn't see any features since it was covered in shadow. Haven't seen the same thing since. I know it's barely anything and not scary at all, but I can't think of a single thing that could explain the lake shit. Also, just 2 days ago while driving home, I saw a light in the night sky, brighter than all the stars around it. I thought it might be a plane until I realized it was completely static in the sky. Just as I reached my house, the thing disappeared. Like it just suddenly poofed out of existence. This is the only event I have ever experienced that I cannot chalk up to a simple hallucination. In the high desert with my telescope. Observing M51, it looks magnificent in the dark skies. With my uncle, dad, and brother. All of a sudden my dad yells, "Holy shit, look at that thing. It's stopping and starting." My dad was a captain in the Air Force and not prone to outbursts like this. Uncle cannot see what he is talking about. I have extensive experience with astronomy and immediately spot it. Chills run down my spine as I watch it dart across the sky in short bursts, only to come to a stop immediately afterward, moving across maybe 5 degrees worth of sky every second, then stopping for a second. My brain is going numb at what I'm witnessing. There is no way this is a satellite, or the ISS, which I have seen many times before. My dad is in awe, keeps saying how it's stopping and going. Grab my binoculars I use for spotting for the scope. Find the object within them. It's 3 long glowing blue cylinders with 3 big red dots on the back end. It is traveling in a perfect sine wave pattern. Like a snake quickly moving through the grass. Its motion is mesmerizing. I try and describe it to my dad what I am seeing. He asks if he can see. Hesitate and watch for another 5 seconds or so. It almost appears to be bending through the sky, as if it were flexible. Perhaps this is just how we are able to perceive its motion? Hand my dad to the binoculars while continuing to focus on the object. It fucking shoots off into the sky in a bright streak of light like Team Rocket flying off into the distance. Completely stunned by what I just witnessed. It is truly the only bizarre experience I can't chalk up to hallucination, and some things I've had happen I can't explain any other way, just because of its shared nature with my dad. I am almost certain some alien life is here and watching over us in some capacity as a result of this.